Nicholas Vachel Lindsay was born in 1879 to a rather impressive family. His father, Vachel Thomas Lindsay, I know it's confusing, just hang on, was a very wealthy and well-revered doctor. This wealth is displayed in the fact that his home is literally on the same block as the governor's mansion. The story of young Vachel Lindsay is one that I can promise you've heard before. His family, which was fundamentally Christian, wanted him to become a doctor just like his father. To help him achieve this, he went to Hareem College in Ohio. Very soon, though, he found he was not in fact good at being a doctor. Instead, he found his passion in painting. Not to be a downer, but his parents knew that this would be an awful career.
Oh my God.
And so, when he wrote to his parents that he was done with this doctor business and that he wanted to paint, they said, "Sure, you can paint. In your free time away from being a doctor." Vachel was, as you can expect, unswayed by this mindset, though. Vachel would go on to study at the Art Institute of Chicago, but his professors basically said that his work was garbage and that it wasn't going to work.
You serious?
After this, he moved to the New York School of Art, where he essentially got the same response from his professors. In 1905, at this point, he said to himself, "You know what? Maybe painting isn't the move." And instead of getting a real career at that point, he picked up poetry instead. The start of his poetry career, as you can guess, was rough. In New York, he started this business strategy where he would print out a pamphlet literally called Rhymes to be Traded for Bread, which is not a great way to not look like a starving artist. Soon enough, though, things began to look up, and he was hired as a teacher for the YMCA. Finally being able to get his feet on the ground at this point, he had an epiphany of what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to travel across America, spreading his poetry around in the wish that he was able to spread hope to those who found themselves in the same desperation that he was in. So he started in New York, right? Then he sailed down to Florida with a buddy of his. Then Mance just started walking all the way up to Kentucky to see his aunt. And at this point, he was performing his poetry across the United States. He was also preparing to head back home to Springfield. And in a letter he wrote to his aunt, he says he would literally rather die in a ditch than go back to his parents. So it's a bit awkward when he did go back to his parents. He was just staying for a little while until continuing his journey, but it was at this point in Vachel's career that he had actually developed some fame. So much so that when he started to travel again, this time heading to New Mexico, he was making so much money that apparently he had to send it home because he simply couldn't keep it in his pockets. Keep in mind, though, he was making this entire journey on foot. Slowly, though, this stream of success began to dry up for Vachel, and fewer people began to collect for his performances. It was also around this time that Vachel tried to marry this one woman named Sarah Teasdale, who also happened to be a poet. Unfortunately, though, she completely rejected him in return for a guy who was in a far better financial situation. This blatant embarrassment is what caused Vachel Lindsay to develop an intense stress when it came to his financials. After staying in New Mexico for a while, he moved to Washington in 1924, married the next year, then had a son and daughter with her. While this did in fact bring him joy for a while, this also escalated his stress with money. Fortunately, though, things began to look up for him, and he did a few more shows across the US and was rewarded with a pretty grand monetary prize at the time. With this success, Vachel moved back to Springfield to his childhood home, and things were looking good for the most part. His family was happy, financials were manageable, and he was known well across the US. As long as nothing detrimental happens to the global economy for the next several years, things should be going pretty well for him. Oh, well, that's a bit stressful. I wonder how Vachel Lindsay Oh my god, he killed himself. Yeah, overwhelmed by the depression, Vachel Lindsay killed himself in 1931 by poisoning himself. The last words he said were, "They tried to get me. I got them first."